Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Edufuturists podcast. We are just us today. Again, this is the big review part number 5. So we've done a few. It has been a while since the last one we did, if we are honest. And as we were going through, we realised there's a good number of brilliant conversations we've had. No pun intended there. That will come up in a moment. A few outstanding and amazing people that we've had from a range of different areas and sectors. So we're looking forward to reviewing that as part of this podcast today. So, Steve, how have you been, mate?
Good. It's been a whirlwind. October. I think my October is going to be like what your November is, Ben. I'm giving this game away when we're discussing it, but sometime in October, just a busy period. It's been a lot of travel and a lot of different places spinning, but really positive, to be honest. Really, really good. And I'm hearing a lot of conversations that feature us now that are around really the future focus bit, as well as some steps to get there. And people go, what do you think? And I'm like, brilliant. Going back to the Brilliant Festival, but I don't know, ultimately it's really positive, and I think it seems like there's more people chatting about this stuff, which is a nice thing, rather than just us being a niche.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what's coming out, and maybe I'm just thinking more deeply into that based on what you've said there, but I've actually been thinking the same, is that people have gone, these lads have been in this space a while, maybe we should have a conversation. And I was on a podcast for somebody else. I wasn't cheating on you, Steve. I got asked to be a guest about some of the ideas guy stuff, and I actually got asked about Edufuturists in the podcast. And when I said to him, oh yeah, we've done over 300 episodes, we've been doing this nearly 9 years, and we've been talking to people from all around the world. The person who's just about to hit their 100 mark, which is incredible, she is brilliant what she's trying to do, was like, oh, and I spoke to another one on another podcast a few weeks ago, and they're on episode number 4. And I was like, it's a really nice position, because it's not like we're just playing at this, and it's not just that we've just had an idea. We've kind of, I suppose, been in that space. So it's a little bit of nice recognition in there. So should we get underway and talk about some of the ones that we've been on with? So way back when, I say way back when, it wasn't that far ago, but we interviewed the legend that is Mr. Ian Phillips, and we actually went to see Ian up in Edinburgh, didn't we? We were part of his safeguarding roundtable about getting heads together and pulling together some ideas. But in that podcast, I really enjoyed the conversation, and we titled it "Comparators, Not Competitors." And actually, some of the elements that we have in education has been around. We've created this level of performance table, and we fight against that quite a lot. But one of the things that Ian talked about was about, actually, we do need comparison that helps people make informed decision, but it's not always about competition. That's cool, right?
Absolutely. And I think I'm going to go through a bit of a list here and probably jump ahead and then come back. But if you look at, let's go through it. Ben, we had to write a post-it note. It's been that long, and it's about 16 post-it notes that we've had that many positive conversations. But if you think about a lot of the people that we met, and just to call out again, tickets are still available for our event. Well in advance, we got it up for the 26th of June 2025 is the Edufuturists Uprising in Manchester. Ben will shout the venue. We've seen it. We love it. We can't wait to see you there. Well, actually, our uprising this year, Ian, Shauna, Pilgrim, Nick wasn't there, but she won an award at Oxford. Naomi helped us out massively. Gemma. All of those people, actually, we met, and then we've spun off things from it. But actually, a lot of the conversations that I remember from those, that little golden thread was complete, not compete. How do we create a system beyond league tables? But also, how do we share best practice? Think about the work that the Portsmouth Education Partnership is doing around digital skills. Think about whole education. Think about the accessibility and the EDI stuff that Nick's doing. It's actually, a lot of that is around, actually, how can we break out the silos, improve things, actually not be shackled by the system, but not create a new system that has the same shackles? How do we create individual authenticity and real, unbelievable practice, that rainforest of shoots of great stuff that I probably talk about everything. People are bored of it. It's probably like my old, what start with why, and the old, that and martini stuff that I was talking about in 2016. Apologies if I'm still talking about it and I bored you. But all of that stuff of how do we create unique individualization in terms of sector and schools and trust, but actually share that so there's a collective feeling across all of education for the greater good.
Yeah, and tied into that, I suppose, is that when we're talking about digital tools, which is what we did talk about with Ian in there, but actually has come across in pretty much everything we do, as there's no doubt in there. We talked about this from a rather than like that competition thing, that idea of we should, from an equity perspective, from an inclusion perspective, from a support perspective, we should be trying really, really hard to do the things that make everybody thrive. And it comes back to that. I know you like to quote Valerie Halland's work around Thrive, and she came on the podcast a few moons ago and was a winner of one of our awards. But the idea of the point of education is to help young people to thrive, and actually even broadly learning full stop, whether that's careers education. It's about thriving. It's about that idea that there is space for everybody, and there is an opportunity for us to make sure that we have a education system that kind of does that. Now, one of going to shout out Shauna Pilgrim, and Shauna obviously was involved in was up at our awards event up in Leeds. But one of the things that Shauna is somebody that I have resonated with, and first time I met Shauna at the Whole Education Conference in 2023. That's the first time I ever met her. I said to her, I think I've found my tribe here of people that care about stuff more than the grades, more than the performance table, more than the Ofsted results. And we're talking about like beliefs, values, and whatever else. And we actually talked about a book that she recommended to me, and I feel like I've talked about it in every conversation I have with people, whether it's on the podcast or not. And that's that collective illusions piece, that we've created a space of believing the lie, believing in an illusion that isn't necessarily something that we need to maintain. So we maybe need to dismantle some of those myths around education that we think have to be the case. And we didn't get into loads of them, but even if we were to go into and think about things like the school building, the school day, the siloed subjects, the exam being the only option, like these illusions that we've kind of believed, and I've worked for a long time, but now we're probably an illusion. We need to break some of them, and I know that that's been a theme throughout a lot of these conversations, hasn't it?
I think so. Going back to Thrive, going back to the very beginning of time, remember, pre-COVID, technology didn't exist, did it, ladies and gentlemen? Remember that. And remember pre-November 2022, when AI didn't exist apparently either. But we'll go back to that time of those conversations with Valerie around what the purpose of education actually is, and also then starting to think about what we want to do and the focus of what we want our teachers and educators to do, and be focused on really supporting these young people to thrive, and also be bothered about them. Because ultimately, if we get both of them right, we'll try and achieve something absolutely wonderful. We might crash and burn at certain points, but it has to be better than the exam factory, finance, terminology-focused rhetoric that we've got, where outcomes and all of this kind of stuff. And it's like, what does that even mean? Like, I attended an event this week, and it was like, just thinking about AI linked into this. The problem is that we've got with education, and one of the panels really discussed, and it was great to hear actually, was education is not ready for AI because it needs to change. And the classroom of today, and the thinking, the process and the structures of education, we're trying to shackle AI into that rather than thinking about what we could do with education and what we could do with learning and how we could change it, and then apply AI to a very different context. I think it's the same for everything, but often in education, we try to put things into the pigeonhole that we've already got, rather than thinking, imagine if we did this. Imagine if we didn't have the classrooms that we got. Imagine if we knocked down all of the knocking down the four walls and the buildings, and education just became learning in any place, anytime, anywhere. Got the Martini model back in. Imagine what AI, tech, and the future of education in terms of assessment. Everything looks like when you redefine and reimagine what education has become in its current form in England, maybe not the world.
Yeah, and I think that is, it's almost like the conversations that we have do make sense. They don't feel like silos in and of themselves. So that in the very nature of us talking about things like non-siloed subjects, and that we should have themes that aren't just like, you do English, that's an hour, then you move to science, that's an hour. But is there something broader than that? There could be. I think there is. And the theme that seems to be coming across here is that education as a system, whether that's a business model, a mathematical model, like you mentioned there, is premised on there's some going to achieve and some not. It's like a curve, that bell curve stuff that we've talked about, the end of average from Todd Rawls and others before. And actually, Nick Ponsford in that episode around like shifting from a deficit model, she obviously talks about the global. She works with the global collective, and interestingly, when we talk about accessibility, inclusion, additional needs, and the other bits that say go with that, it really ties to, I think, the other episode 260 with Naomi, a good friend of us, of the podcast, where she talked about and rather than either or and both and it's that idea that it's not that we can't have an inclusive idea and an inclusive education system, or a place where people perform academically. You can have both. It's not either or. It's and I think that deficit model thing that Nick talked about has got to be something we address. It's got to be something that we seriously consider, and we move towards that. We've shift from a deficit model towards a thriving model, to a personalized, individualized model, to a not a one size fits all, but a many size fits many. I think I've just made some stupid idea up, but you know what I mean. So it's like that people have a size that fits them. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
100%. And I think it's that whole thing of, I think we discussed it on the Vespa one as well. Well, and I think that's probably already been reviewed. I can't remember the post-it note. Apologies, but post-it note is getting bigger. But yeah, we've got Vespa.
No, Martin is
too.
Martin
within the last 10. But ultimately, you then link about that, and then think about, okay, I am going somewhere. Let me just collect my thought again and go with it, because I've just waffled. Okay. Meeting them where they're at is one thing. And also, away from that, Martin talked about actually to and from. When you're working with students, that some will be goal-focused and some will be moving away from something, as in like, how do we actually support a variation of students, variation of teachers? Some people plan the whole of the summer. Some people plan the morning or the night before or on the same day. Actually, are we personalising the teaching experience as much as we're personalising the learning experience and the learners what they want and when they want it? And actually, the Vespa model is around actually how do you support those students often for the best achievement in terms of like holistic education, not just the grade, and actually some shifting them away from, if I could just get away from this to actually, I want to do this. I think this is what we discussed with Martin.
Yeah, it's that, and it comes back to another comment that we've had with people, and it's that I heard somebody say not too far away, not even in an education context, but it absolutely was related in there. Is that phrase? You can teach a horse, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. I don't know where I think I have talked about it on the podcast actually. And he said, in education, what we try and do, in schooling, what we try and do is we try and force the horse to the water and it doesn't drink. But actually, in order to help horses drink, it's about making horses thirsty. And it's actually finding a drink that they want to drink as well. So my whole thought process that comes in there is it does require that mindset. It does require that element of meeting people where they are, and it's also providing a structure for curiosity, a structure for something that really lands. That actually, and I know that we're jumping all over, and this is fine because this is what we do. But that episode that I recorded with Dr. Hilary Levers, you were aware, Steve, at that point, and I interviewed her, and she's the head of engineering UK, and we were talking about engineering education, and she said about we talked about being beyond the factory, and we talked about like how engineering is more than just what it has always had traditionally been, and obviously we talked about like bridging gaps and all the other bits that go with that. But what I will say really clearly is that you've got to, what we said in engineering that refers right back to that, is that idea that it's got to be something that they're interested in. It's got to be something that makes sense. Like, I just don't get why we still perpetuate a model of learning that and the stuff that young people are not interested in, or that they can Google, or that they can find out very, very quickly, just because we think that is culturally what we need, or that is what it's always been, and then ask the question why they're not engaged. I don't think there's ever an issue with engagement on TikTok or on Xbox or on Fortnite. It's interesting, isn't it? Because they're interested. And I'm not saying they should just don't listen to what I'm not saying. People who are listening that were saying think that every kid should do Roblox or Fortnite. I'm not saying that. I'm saying there's something that happens when they're engaged, and if you can lose yourself in the moment, can't you? As Eminem would say. Not me, I wouldn't say it, because I'm not calling myself Eminem, Vanilla Ice, Gary Barlow. But you see what I'm saying, right?
Did just call yourself Eminem. But at the same point, we're a long way from 8 Mile now, Ben. So let's bring it, little rabbit. Let's bring it back. 100%. I think it's not about the tool per se. We're not comparing social media to schools and learning and everything else. But actually, learning is very, very different. Concentration and focus has become very, very different from when we were young nippers, Ben, many, many years ago, to now your kids in secondary school and mine just about to step into school. Their life is completely different. The way that they communicate is often different. The distractions of life are different. You know, I remember going, you know, if you wanted to meet your mates, you used to just go around to their house. Sometimes there'd be loads of bikes outside their house. That's probably a telltale sign of where all your mates were. But if they weren't there, you'd then maybe try and find them at the park. And if they weren't at the park or where you'd normally meet them, a couple of locations, you'd go home. You try explaining that to maybe your kids, Ben, I don't know if you've tried, and they'd go, you're mad. That never happened. What a waste. Because ultimately, they don't just accept the new things. They expect the new things. They expect technology. They expect digital. They expect live and instant feedback and gratification and all those kind of things. I'm not talking about social media. I'm just saying that's what they are used to. My kids are nowhere near social media. They're 4 and 2.5. But ultimately, I still see that they are very, very different to when I was young and when I was in education. And I think at times what we do is we forget and we're delivering it where we're at and not meeting them where they're actually at. And I think that's been the case for such a long period. Not teachers' fault. But
Absolutely.
I think, let's be honest, that is a real realization of, and I say this often, of sometimes you have to forget it's not about you, it's about them. And if we continue to think it's about us, we will never change anything.
Yeah. And this is it, right? I've talked about this when it comes to marketing quite a lot. When you're working with businesses, and I get to be, as one of my other hats I wear on, support businesses when it comes to marketing and what they do there. And interestingly, that message that I try to say to them all the time is, you need to get over the fact that you are not the hero of your story. The customer has to be the hero of the story, right? And it sounds really obvious, it sounds really trite, but then the behaviour of a lot of businesses is, I've got this solution or I've got this product, we're amazing, let's talk about all of our products. When actually it's the user, it's the person, it's the consumer, the customer, the service. Like, that's who this is for. And it's the same in education, right? Like, whether we want to perpetuate a model and whether we think that we know best, because what do these pesky kids know? Like, what do they know? They don't know what's best for them. And probably not. Like, if you left a kid, I don't know, like if you've ever left a kid overnight with some, or when you've left them on holidays, it got older.
Like, imagine you go on holiday, it's going to be coming up soon.
Yeah, that's it.
You've left them. They've either gone to New York accidentally when you're in Miami, or you've left them at home.
Yeah, but like what does he do? Like, the craziness of that story is, left to their own devices, young people are going to like spend all their money on pizza, or they're going to do. Yeah, I'm not saying we don't need guidance, but my whole thing is that why do we feel the need for control? Why do we feel the need to determine this is what you learn at this point in this way, examined in that way? I just think it's perhaps maybe I'm too liberal, maybe I'm idealistic, but it comes to that, and it does. And I'm not just doing this to try and make a segue into it. It feels like it comes to the bit that Howell Roberts talked about, and obviously about his brilliant book, which if you have not read, Botheredness by Howell. Yeah, Howell. I said it right. I thought I said it wrongly. It was absolutely brilliant. Great stories, loads of great film references. But he talks about being bothered as educators, like being bothered to care about your subject, to care about your young people, to care about the world. Like, it's not saying teachers don't. It's just saying, does the system really bothered? I don't know, Steve. Is it? Or is it a little bit passive?
Is it bothered, or is it bothered about the wrong things, potentially? Maybe we do care, but actually we're just bothered about the wrong things right now because we've just been focusing on that for such a long period of time. Just going back to the Home Alone thing, by the way, it could be coming out pretty soon, not Home Alone, but ultimately, just going back to the fact that of what the world looks like now, Home Alone, I think they did this, didn't they? Google supported them with Google Home, and then that whole thing of it'll come out as a meme or something, and it'll be like, imagine Home Alone now. Well, it won't be the case, because ultimately social media would not allow it, and they'd see it, and they'd have homes like technology around, and they'd go, or they'd have like you don't plug an alarm clock in. Apologies if anybody still does. Wonderful. I'm sure that's a great bit, but actually the technology of unplugged. So right from the beginning story, your alarm goes off on your phone. You hadn't unplugged it. It'd have to be very, very different start to finish. The kid isn't alone in the house anymore because technology has changed what the story would be, and actually it wouldn't be a story anymore. It's a wonderful movie. By the way, it's not a documentary, everybody. It's not real life. Nobody left their kid at home. But actually, you put that now 30, I think it came out in 1993. I'm a massive Home Alone fan. 31 years. I think that might even be Home Alone 2, by the way, but it's definitely 91 and 93, I think it is. Ben's going to Google it and then going to tell me whether I'm wrong.
No, mate, it's going to blow your mind. In 90, the first one came out.
Yeah, and was it 1993 or 1992 there?
I haven't found that bit, mate.
So 34 years ago.
It's 92, yeah.
But we look back and we laugh about it because but I know that it's slapstick, but just put that into context of actually think about the world of how much it's evolved since the launch of ChatGPT and generative AI in what we now use and how quickly that's moved it on. We've been having conversations about, and I don't want to jump the gun because we'll do it in the next review, about education reform taking 6 years. 6 weeks and things have changed so quickly. It's very difficult to do so, but we are so outdated in terms of some of our principles. I'm probably going to get a bashing on social media and people say, yeah, but just think that we've been doing it for such a long period of time that we've forgotten how far actually time has moved on. But it does go back to the principle that hasn't changed since the 1990s of we actually just need to go back to caring. Start right at the very, very beginning of what does the basics of learning look like? What is the purpose of learning? What is the purpose of education? And what does good teaching actually look like? Bit of delivery, all core principles of actually the great stuff, and remove, where possible, all of the chaos and the noise that has just become flooded into education, and probably the reason why educators are leaving, because all of the stuff now has become such a key part of the job that they never really wanted to do anyway.
Sure. And Howell talked about passion and compassion, like as that's it, right? So we all know, and it's anecdotes and it's all like a little bit trite, but we all know the teachers that we loved were the teachers that gave a shit about us and gave a shit about what they were teaching. Like, that is the gold, and we're very, very fortunate that we get to meet these people on a regular, and I would suggest that the vast majority of educators are passionate and compassionate, because you just wouldn't survive for any length of time if you weren't passionate and compassionate. And the need for that to be recognised and to be celebrated and to be compensated has to be part of that. But interestingly, even from an ITT perspective and development of teachers and everything else that goes with that, nobody says that. They say that you've got to be competent at lesson planning and observations and feedback and questioning. But does anybody look at that passion and compassion bit? Do they? I don't know. Maybe they do. Do they look and say, we don't just want automatons that can deliver science, maths, French curriculum, but actually want to be around young people and, God forbid, or dare I say it, like young people or like being around people. Interesting, one of my children, my eldest, talked about how she says their mates talk about teachers that like kids and teachers that don't like kids. Like, what? Is that a real thing? How? Like, how can this be saying they don't like kids? Like, it's hard, man.
But to be fair, I can probably remember some of those when I were in education.
Yeah, 100%. And they feel like they could.
I don't think it's
a
changed,
control
but
thing, right?
Yeah, but I think, but maybe some people that did care have lost the sight, and it's not the fact that they don't care or don't like kids; it's the fact that they have just lost the fire in their belly because of all the other stuff that we've made them do that is beyond the thing that drove their passion in the first place to the profession.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. And actually, Jo Hardy in that episode 264, she's from TTS, which used to be RM, and she talked about this idea of there are some incredibly challenging times and probably as difficult. There's still some difficulties even post COVID that teachers are navigating and education systems. In fact, I say even, like, this absolutely are. But this idea of considering creating a culture of innovation is interesting here. And why I think this might be pertinent to this conversation is that she talked about creating a culture that allows for innovation and like computational thinking as part of that. Now, this is not a tangent. Like, computational thinking isn't just about computer science. It's about thinking in a logical set, looking at things from a variety of different viewpoints. It is that critical thinking elements that sits with it. And she talked about that, like how that turns into resilience and learning from failure stuff. And I think that was really powerful and probably is more pertinent to what we're talking about there in terms of botheredness, in terms of resilience, in terms of like not being competitors. It has to be built on a culture, as we've said multiple times, where we can accept that things go wrong, but as long as we'll learn from it, and therefore we won't keep repeating the same mistake. I think if I were to nail my colour to the mast, that we are repeating the same mistake, not learning from it. We're seeing kids fail. We're okay with more than 50% of young people failing at 16 years old. We're okay, and I'm not saying we're okay, but we are, by keeping it going, we are saying we're okay with it because we're not changing it. I'm not saying we've got a full alternative, but that is certainly something that sits in there, and I think that computational thinking, critical thinking around our system would be relevant, not just in our system.
Yeah, I agree. I think and also the thing that I loved about that conversation as well was taking the knowledge and the learning from industry and applying it to her roles in coding, in governorship and leadership on trust boards and things like that. Of, one, the learning from that, but also that bit of actually how different industry and the enterprise sector is compared to education, how that potentially accelerated as well. I think, yes, taking risks, absolutely, going through all of that process. And I totally agree with you. I think, when did we take a risk in education? I, and you do, Ben, do lots of work in education, and I respect it, and I know that it is the case because we're not that far out of education ourselves. So this whole thing of, we'd love to do this, but our focus, it's our Ofsted year. It's our Ofsted year. We can't do too much different because we've got Ofsted coming any day, or they could come at some point this year, and you go, right, so we've got to wait a year for them to not move anything forward and take any risk because you're worried that Ofsted, who should be supporting positive change, we can't change anything for it because they're coming at some point this school year. And then they go through a cycle, and then they'll be after it. Then they'll be taking a learning from what they've got, changing some bits or just continuing. And then they're in the next cycle. And I'm just like, it's that whole thing of, that shouldn't be the finish line. I go back to, I post about it, the 1980s Nike advert. There is no finish line in innovation. There is no finish line in life.
Infinite games, right? We've been talking about infinite games forever.
If we just focus on that finish line like a race, you probably put in every bit of effort to get there. You're exhausted, and you just focus on that end point and then recover it. Where actually, go at a slower, steadier pace. You can take a bit more risks if you know that actually it's a longer term plan, and you're not going to force yourself into an injury because you've done. That's what it should be. It's an infinite game. There is no finish line in learning and education, but we have shackled ourselves by different things of a finish line in terms of SATs, a finish line in terms of this assessment, of GCSE, Ofsted, so many different variations of the finish line, and it's become a finite game rather than an infinite game.
Yeah, and it's something that we have talked about on the podcast, and we will continue to talk about on the podcast. It's something that I feel like we've been going on about forever, and I know that other people are now jumping into that space as well. And one of the things that we talked about with Gemma Gwilliam, good friend of ours from Portsmouth, was about that. She talked about that was why we all need digital champions. But I remember that in that conversation, what it needs is this something that's not. So when you said that about we're in Ofsted year, or we're expecting this, or we're just at this budget, like she's saying, actually, there's never a right time for tech champions. There's never a right time for the next piece of tech. There's never a right time for the next piece. So we've got to just iterate and support organisations into that space, and then help that to bring as an enabler. So actually, if you put the time in it, it'll enable the personalisation, it'll enable the choice. Yeah, which is really powerful. And it would be absolutely remiss of us not to finish this review with a shout out and a reference to the conversations that we had at Brilliant over in Liverpool, and you will see some of these. You'll see the interview that we did, the panel with Hugh Viney, Tom Rogerson and Michelle Crowther on there, and we've also got some other bits that are going to be coming out over the next few weeks around some of our smaller snippets that we interviewed some wonderful people. But well done to Martin and the team over at Brilliant. It was a great day. I'm not gonna be the guy that says it was a brilliant festival, but it was great to have something up in the north where people were genuinely having authentic conversations about the future of education, and we loved that panel, didn't we, mate? And we loved the conversation.
Absolutely loved it. It will be coming out, the conversation, as part of the podcast series coming very, very soon, and then the snippets will as well. Lots of positive conversations of people that we've met that will become future guests and future friends and part of our community. Absolutely, yeah, great festival. Really enjoyed it. Lots of different people that we hadn't met, and things like Chester Zoo. We're ready for all of this stuff. Like, just some real thoughts of future of education just beyond what people see in terms of school and those kind of types.
Yeah, and I know that we will pick up some of the individual things, because obviously that panel conversation came out last week. But something that really landed with me was how Steve said something about we have lots of conversations but we need to make change. We need to become change makers, not just change sayers and change thinkers. We need to be change makers. And the team, Martin and the team there, are really trying to facilitate that. The people that are on the panel are trying to facilitate that. We've been trying to facilitate that as Edufuturists, and as we announce more and more partnerships and more work that we're trying to do, it's not just trying to talk about it, even though we're talking on a podcast right now and we're creating little videos and content and writing stuff. We're in the midst of it. We're trying to help. We're trying to be at the chalk face, and also, more importantly, supporting those people who are at the chalk face, who are bossing this. So yeah, it's been 10 episodes. We had 10 episodes between our last review, and we've touched all of them. We've mentioned all of them, and we probably could have talked about each one for as long as each one of those podcasts were there, because there's a lot of powerful content in there. And actually, it's just the start. We've got some brilliant. Our old mucker, Mr. Fitzpatrick's going to be joining us back as well in the next season, and some other people that are coming that are very, very exciting, and we're looking forward to getting out into the world. But yeah, it's been a good one, mate. Thanks for having this conversation. It's always good to reflect on what we've done and review it.
Nice to just always step back onto the soapbox.
Yeah.
Just between me and you, mate. So, but yeah, always a pleasure, buddy. Yeah, love it.
Perfect. Don't forget to get your tickets for the Edufuturist Uprising. You can grab them on our website, edufuturists.com. And don't forget, if this is resonating with you, let us know. Drop us a little message on there. Subscribe to the newsletter on there if you're not done already, or make a little comment wherever you're watching it. And most importantly, we want to make sure that we celebrate people and champion them. So please tag us. Let us know if you think there's people we need to speak to, and or share this stuff out into the world so that more and more people can hear about it. Yeah, let's see you next time, bud.
Yeah, see you soon, mate. Have a good one, everybody.